So, we were finishing up the second of 6 Christmas Eve services, and I am standing on stage just as a volunteer, and I am singing the most boring version of I'll Be Home for Christmas that you could ever imagine while snowballs are being thrown at my face. So this version was not supposed to be boring. I had been going to the church for a couple of years, and they asked me, after I hadn't done that much, to arrange this showstopper version of I'll Be Home for Christmas. This is going to be the closing of the service. It's going to be great. So I spent a couple of weeks doing this. I read out my chart. I recorded a demo. I sent it to the band. We were ready to go. And it was arranged specifically to get people to pay attention. Well, we are a couple of minutes before the first service, and the pastor realizes that we don't have enough time for all the things in the service. So we're going to cut a worship song, and you know what else we're going to do? We're going to move that special song from being the last song in the service to it's going to be the walkout music instead. And so I'm standing there in front of all the Christmas Eve crew, and I'm sort of like just, trying to keep my cool. No big deal. It's fine. And I say, hey, this was not arranged to be walkout music. And so he says, oh no, it's fine. It's going to be fine. Just do it. And I'm like, okay, we'll do it. So we get to the end of that service, and they dismiss everybody, and he says, okay, Merry Christmas, have a good night. And so everybody sort of like stands up and they turn to leave, and it's like, I'll be home for Christmas. And so people are like, they said I could go, so then they stood there like with one foot out the door and the other one in the auditorium for the next 5 minutes. Surprise. And so anyway, surprisingly, that was not the desired effect for the walkout music. So in between those next 2 services, they asked me, hey, can you do a new arrangement of that song, but one that people will not want to listen to? Which, is what my whole music training prepared me for. So I said yes, and went to the band, and I was like, okay, just follow the chords, no tempo changes, no volume changes. I want you to play the most boring elevator version. I was like kind of a little spicy at this moment. And so we did it. I sang the whole thing. I was like, I'll be home for Christmas. It was like an octave down, no sustained notes, and it was boring, and it worked. Everyone walked out. Oh, but I forgot the best part. Okay, so it's Christmas Eve, and so we bring all the kids in, and there needs to be a family moment to just get everybody involved. So what we did was, in this tight 60-minute service, we had an 11-minute snowball fight. Wait, what? Yeah, so there were these like big cotton snowballs, and we spent a little while first like doing this target practice, and then it was like, okay, put a minute countdown on the clock and just throw them at each other. Do you know how long a minute is? That's a long time to be throwing snowballs at your fellow congregant. Anyway, it was a little awkward. So after the first service, we realized there were snowballs across the entire congregation, and we had like 10 minutes to turn the service around. So what do? For the second service, they said, why don't we just have everyone pick up the snowballs that are out there and throw them up on the stage during the walkout music? Yes. What's funny is for about 6 months before that, I had been kind of wondering and feeling like God might be leading me to a new church, and I wasn't sure if I was really hearing his voice or not, And this is true. And so I really wanted to make sure that if he was calling me somewhere, that I was listening to his voice and I was not just doing something selfishly. So as I'm standing there, after throwing away weeks of work, performing what can only be described as a catatonic Christmas and dodging snowballs left and right, message received. Like, I got it. So I did sort of like let myself calm down, prayed about it a little bit more, and I did end up going to another church eventually. But I will say that even though God has his ways, like what happened to me, who cares? No big deal. The service was still amazing. But he can work things together for good even when there are blind spots in how our own planning or lack thereof really can come at the expense of our people. And so I want to take the next couple of minutes to just give you some practical tips to help make sure that your planning is something that is people-minded. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is tracking your time. So you don't always need to do this. Some churches track their time. By the way, I had this like great animation thing, but I didn't transfer it to them in the right way. So only look at the one point that I'm talking about and pretend that the other ones don't exist until I talk about them. So, or just, if you put your hands like this over your eyes, and then I'll just be like, lower them. We're good? Okay, so, yeah, don't read ahead. Thank you. See, this guy gets it. Okay, so you don't need to do this all the time. At this church, our turnaround times were not that tight until Christmas Eve, but at that time, there really was a way for us to know how long these things were going to take. We knew months ahead of time. Like, the service can only go 65 minutes because the children's ministry is in the parking lot and all this kind of stuff. So even if you're a church that doesn't need to do this a lot of times, think about maybe you do need to do this sometimes. And it's especially useful when you do have a tight turnaround. One of the ways that you can do this is when you're adding songs through Planning Center, for instance, or if you're doing them in another way, just look at the recorded time. If you're doing something with a multi-track and you're performing it just like it was recorded, you know how long that takes. You can actually put that information into Planning Center so that when you do the song, it sort of imports that song's length. And you can say, but you know what? This week, even though the song is normally 4 minutes and 45 seconds, it's going to take 7 minutes-ish, just because we are going to have some transitions. So including those transitions are like, I'm going to say something in the middle. We're going to do 2 extra down choruses at the end. And you don't always know that you're going to do that, but a lot of times you do. You have a plan on these things frequently. So what you can do is sit down during the week and just play through the song like you think you're going to do it and just put a little timer there. When you do put that into Planning Center, you're going to see it's going to total all those things up, and you can see about how long your set list is going to be. And the reason you want to do this exact same service that I'm talking about, the worship leader wanted to do this new version of Angels We Have Heard on High, and it was kind of weird, and it was kind of like electronic and stuff. I'm like, that's what people want at Christmas. And so we spent about a third of our time rehearsing this song that we ended up cutting at the last minute. We could have known this the whole time. Like, everything else we did would have been so much better if we didn't waste time on this one thing that we should have just never done in the first place. So that, especially as a musician, I'm sure you all know, sometimes it's just fun to play. But when you're cramming to learn things, don't work on more than you have to work on, and the timing can really help you with that. The second step is to plan early. This is easy to understand, but harder to do. So you can do this in your scheduling and in scheduling people and scheduling your songs. So let's talk about scheduling of your people. I recommend that you schedule your teams 2 to 3 months early, no matter how big your team is, how big, small, whatever. People on your team have lives outside of your worship ministry. People are going on vacation. They have work events. They've got the sports tournaments that their kids are going to go to. All these things that they can plan in their schedule. Now, one of the things people ask me at Planning Center frequently is, how do I get my people not to decline? And that is a really good question, but that is not where the question starts. The question starts weeks ahead of time. Your people do not volunteer because they want to decline. They don't want to decline. They want to serve. Worshiping is fulfilling. Music is fun. They're there because they want to do it. Oftentimes people decline because there really was no option, or because you didn't give them good enough options. If you let them know when you want them to serve ahead of time, first of all, that's saying, hey, team, I respect you and your time, and now I can ask you to respect me back. And it also gives them a chance to get their schedule in order. In Planning Center, you do this with the matrix, and the matrix is our view that shows you lots of different weeks at a time. We actually have a brand new version of it that you can get to right now. It has a ton of features that people have been asking for the last 10 years, and you basically see a different column for each of your weeks, and you can see everything. So you can put 2 or 3 months in there, add all your people. Once it looks good, you send out those emails. They get one email for the whole 2-month period, and they can respond to that. Now, also planning your songs early. When I started at my first worship pastor position a long time ago, I got there, and this was before Planning Center existed. And so I got there, and there were like manila folders outside the worship office. And I'm like, what are these? And like, oh yeah, we burn CDs and someone drives them to people's houses like every week. And I was like, well, I will not be doing that. And so innovation happened. When it's time to learn a new song, what you want is for your people to have as much time to rehearse it as possible, and thinking once again about their schedule. A lot of your people have one night free a week. Let's say you have band rehearsal on Thursday, but their night is Friday. You got to give them that music a full week ahead of time. Or they're cramming, or they don't have time to learn it. People don't often want to show up not knowing what they're doing. Sometimes they just didn't have the time to do it. You can usually fix this. Give them the music one full week before the rehearsal. Now, it's hard to get there if you're giving it to them 2 days ahead of time person. All you have to do, though, is one time get 2 weeks ahead. Do 2 weeks at once, one time, and then you're set up forever. So try to get them those songs 1 week before rehearsal. And the other thing you can do is if you have new songs, you can put those into Planning Center anytime you want to. 2 months ahead. We're going to do this new song on Easter. I'm putting it there. Schedule the people. They can learn that song even if you have no idea what the rest of the songs are going to be. When you actually do finish the set, you can let them know about that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the reason that we're doing all that is because the more prepared your team is, the more they have had a chance to sit with these songs and know them, the more you're actually allowing your team members to be worship leaders and not just people who are like, do we do the bridge 8 times or 12 times? That's a real one, huh? And I don't remember what the chords are for the intro, and they're focusing on all those things because they just didn't have time to learn it, instead of actually being a worship leader themselves, and then in turn allowing your congregation to not have as many distractions as like wrong notes and people that look like they are holding on for dear life. Like you are allowing the congregation to just experience the presence of God without as many distractions as you can avoid. Okay, next up is communicating with your team, and I did start this one a little bit. So you can put a lot of songs in there first, and then when you actually have things done, you can email your team a second time. What? This is possible. You can click the email icon. It looks like an envelope, and you can do that, and you can tell them, hey team, everything is there now for you. It's all there ready for you to rehearse. Because even though you might think that your team treats the services app like Instagram, and they're like, what's new? I'm just gonna constantly scroll through this. They don't. But you can just tell them. What? You can tell them something new is here for you. It's all ready. You do that, tell them that week ahead of time. All of these things are little things that are teaching your team, I respect you, I respect your time. This is gonna come back in a minute. If you change a key, email your team. If you cut a song, email the team. If you're gonna do now why doesn't Planning Center just do that for me? Because I don't know how much you're gonna do. You might do 10 things that day, another thing the next day. Once you're done, if you think it is something noteworthy, email your team of those changes. And make sure that you're also making that personal. Planning Center can really make it possible for you just to send out just mass template emails that have nothing to do with anything. And those are fine sometimes, but you want to customize those things. So don't just say, don't have a template that's like set finished or something. Take the extra time to be like, hey, I added a new song to the end of the set. It is this one. That way, some of your people are like, oh, I know that one already. It's not as important for me to log in. And I'd be like, oh, I've never heard that. I better log in right away. So personalize those things to make them know that you are thinking of them and want them to succeed. If you respect your team and their time, then you can ask them to respect yours in return. So let's actually move on to the next thing, which is starting rehearsals on time. Whew. What? How do you? I don't know. It is possible. So whether it's a rehearsal or a call time, you're going to see in Planning Center here, I have named my rehearsal time band rehearsal downbeat. That helps my people understand this is not the time that we show up and then spend 10 minutes like tuning and whatever. You should show up however long you need to. If you have to bring in a whole drum set, you might have to come 30 minutes early. If you just waltz into the keyboard like some people, you can show up 5 minutes before the service starts. And if you're a guitar player that carries in 400 pedals because you just want to do that, then you also, oh, shots fired. Okay. No, but this one sounds different. Okay. Look, that's coming from a guy that stays on the one piano patch on the keyboard for the whole time, so I'm not one to judge. People have often done a lot of things you don't know anything about to be at your rehearsal. I have to work late a lot, and I have to go straight to rehearsal. I don't have time for dinner. So when I get to rehearsal at 6:30 hungry, and we spend 30 minutes of sound, of like getting the microphones plugged in, and not everybody showed up, and that happens week after week after week, I'm like, this is just really annoying. Like, you don't care about my time. You have no idea that I have other things going on around here. So if you need to spend that time, figure out how to say, cool. Tech team, you show up at 6:30, everybody else show up at 6:45. You can plan those things ahead of time. You just have to think about it and put it down, and then communicate those new expectations with your team. If you have not been doing this, you can't just flip the switch and not tell anybody about it and be like, well, why didn't you show up on time? You should have known that's what I wanted. No, you have to say, hey team, I'm gonna start getting ahead on these things. Why? Because I want you to be able to be prepared. I want us to be worshipers. I want us to feel like we know what we're doing. And so we're going to start rehearsals on time. I'm going to give you your music early so that we can actually come together and we can rehearse, not practice. Practice is what you do on your own before you get there. And we rehearse together. But they can't do that if you gave them the music yesterday. It has to start with you. Okay. So factor in your setup time, and it might be a process. It's not just going to happen overnight. The last thing here is you can create a music rundown. Now, one of my music director friends started doing this, and I was like, I love this so much that now I'm doing it. And this is, I know what my whole set list is going to be. I sit through it on my own as the worship leader, and I figure out, okay, how are we going to start this song? How are we going to transition from this song to this song? Where is someone going to talk in the middle of things? Do I need, I need the keyboard player to play this instead of the guitar player because of the guitar player's changing whatever in between. I can think of all those things, and I can write all that down. Now, you can put those in with each song if you want to, but what I recommend is making a plan note. It's on the left-hand side of that plans page if you use Planning Center. And I make a note called music, and I put the whole rundown of all the songs there so that my team can log in. They know at any point they can go and they can look and see, oh, here's everything. They don't have to search for it song by song. I also then copy that and send that to them in an email. And I say, hey, here's your music rundown for this week. If you want to delete this email, it's also on Planning Center. You can find it there. But this, first of all, make sure that you're not spending your rehearsal time trying to figure out all those things. Some of those, absolutely. You don't know what it's going to be like until you're there, until you're feeling and you want to play around with it. But a lot of them you can figure out ahead of time. So think through those things, make that music rundown, and send that to your people. So all of these things together, tracking, making sure you don't do practice songs you don't need, planning early so your people don't have to decline and so that they can actually be worshipers, making sure you tell your team when things change, starting your rehearsals on time and sending them those music rundowns. Those are just some small ways that you can make sure that your team knows that you care about them. It's not just a worship, it's a worship team. We focus a lot of times, rightfully so, on the worship part of it because that is the most important part, but that we forget that it is also a team of people that are all coming from different places, and we want to make sure that we are valuing them. Because when it comes time for your service to actually start, just like we saw in this panel, a lot of things can go wrong. You might change things on purpose. The Holy Spirit might lead you in a different direction. All that is great. You can throw your plans out the window. But the more your team is prepared when those extra little bumps on the road happen, some of those, if they do end up snowballing out of control, you might just be ready to catch them.